really important for all of us to engage. This is the Thursday Pivot, and welcome. My name is Lori Power, and I'm a group benefit specialist. Intentional, focused, strategic, consistent. That's why we do this every week. As we know, communication is key. If technology was a king before, it's a tyrant now. And most of us are judged, and business is going to be reflected on our written word and our ability to write the word. So that led to our conversation with Dawn, and why I asked her to come on to the show, because I love that on her website, you will see the curse of knowledge. Tell me about that, Dawn. Introduce yourself though first, to take us through a little bit about who Dawn is. Dawn Henwood, the PhD English professor. Go.
Yes, that's right. Once upon a time, I was an English professor. Actually, my PhD was in 19th century American literature by women. And so it might not seem a really straightforward route to what I do now. I work now with people who tend to have complex topics that they need to communicate. And so I spend a lot of time working with entrepreneurs and a lot of folks in science-based, tech-based businesses, and so on. But how I got here really was I started out teaching, my first teaching job, 29, at U of T, and I was the world's worst professor. Like, there was just, nobody is even close in competing for this title. And so really quickly, I had to figure out what was going on. And it became apparent to me that not everybody at age 18 or 19 was absolutely passionate about 19th century American literature or Shakespearean sonnets or whatever it was I was teaching. And that I had this kind of esoteric appreciation of this stuff. And I had to try to make this relevant to, 19-year-olds who were thinking about what 19-year-olds think about. And so then that was the start of kind of developing the skill set that I have now, which is helping people, say, overcome this knowledge gap that happens when you're an expert, whether you're an expert in group benefits or you're an expert in law or you're an expert in whatever. How do you find a way to connect with the people who don't have that expertise?
Even in your post this morning on LinkedIn, so if you're not following Dawn on LinkedIn, I highly, highly recommend you follow her, because even those daily posts that she puts out on how to build your brand, how to communicate that brand. Today your post was all about our people connecting with you and what your messaging is. Take us through that consulting role that you work with people like me to help us express ourselves.
I think it really is all about the expression. I love that you use that word because to me, my role is really to help people just kind of find the words that are already there. And so I work with people in a number of different ways. Some people want me to write something for them, whether it's a white paper, proposal, blog copy, whatever. They want it done for them. And then other people want some coaching so they can do it themselves. And often when I work with clients who, especially entrepreneurs, they kind of want a blend. But my take, whether I'm working as an author or a coach or a trainer, is always that's my job, is to just kind of bring out what is already there. So the process I use is messy. If you don't like finger painting, then we may not get along very well, because to me, you have to be able to roll your sleeves up and dig into some questions that you may think you already know. But just to really get to the bottom of what your purpose is, what your passion is as an organization, what you're trying to achieve, and what you want your voice to be.
It's interesting the way things overlap. So my oldest boy is a student at Grant MacEwan, and today he said, "Mom, I need you to just proof this quick essay that I have to write about somebody who wrote an essay about the first draft." And the takeaway from him is that everybody writes a crappy first draft, but the first draft is the hardest draft. But then once they write it, they're not willing to go on to the second draft and the third draft and to polish it down into something worthwhile. And the takeaway from that conversation is it expended so much energy to get that first draft on the page. It's like, okay, I'm one and done. How often is that our frustration as writers, as communicators, in people not getting the messaging because we have stopped at that first draft?
Interesting. And you're a writer, a prolific writer, so you certainly understand that the first draft's just the beginning. For me, there's a mindset shift that has to happen. I'm a big fan of the essayist Anne Lamott. She has a book called, I'll put it in the text chat, Bird by Bird, which is her book about writing. And her number one piece of advice that I took from that book was write crappy, to use another word, first drafts, right? And so often when I'm working with people, one of the things we're trying to do is to figure out how to get the words out quicker or more quickly, because your first draft should not be what's taking all of your time. And if you are really thinking of writing as a process, not as one and done, then you budget your time. And often I recommend kind of a third, a third, a third. So a third for drafting, a third for planning, a third for drafting, a third for revising. It doesn't have to happen in a linear way. But if I have an important email to send and I think, you know what, this is an email that could backfire, I need to spend some time on it. Maybe it's going to take me an hour to craft this email. Well, I am making sure that it's only taking me 20 minutes to actually type out that first draft. And the rest of the time I have spent, maybe getting up and taking a walk and figuring out what I want to say, or doing some doodling or whatever it takes, and then, revising.
And that's an interesting take. I actually have never thought about it that way, because how many times do we have that important email and we agonize over every single paragraph and then get to the end and go, all right, I'll send it off. Whereas if you, like you said, if we had taken that time, made it a faster first draft, we could have taken the time and made sure there was no errors. Anybody else in that role have, now that you can think back and go, man, I really should have stepped back and take another look at that? Yeah, I think we got head nods all over the place. What do you hear in creating content from entrepreneurs and professionals as their number one frustration?
The time factor, I think, is a big one. I think also, I think as entrepreneurs, a lot of us struggle with this fear that we're not good enough, period, right? And then there's the kind of putting yourself out in public and thinking, oh, I'm not good enough. So the confidence piece is huge. And because I've placed so much value on expression, that to me, it's very often about giving people confidence in their own voice. And once they get that confidence, they find that the words start to come more easily, and they realize, like, I don't have to, put, as Dawn Hinwood, when I show up on LinkedIn or wherever, I'm showing up as Dawn. I'm not trying to create this super impressive professional person who doesn't exist. And I think as writers, a lot of people have almost this kind of, I'm not using this in a clinical sense, but kind of almost like this split personality, right? And so they feel they have to be somebody completely different, when it's really just about communicating in print with the same qualities of warmth and human connection and integrity and intelligence that you show in person.
I get it, because that's my background. But I remember moving from radio, writing copy in 30-second splashes, to moving into newspaper, where it had to be more conventional writing, very formalized, stylized writing, to then, when I left newspaper and started my own business here. Very different ways of communicating and getting those messages across, for sure. I always think of my writing as my first draft, the outline, is just bones on the paper, right? Like you just, as you say, as quickly as possible, get it down. You can put, the sleeves and the dress and all of that on later. What do you want to say?
And most importantly, you can throw half of it out later. I mean, I think that is really, I talk a lot about creative waste and the need for it, right? So for me, this is just my process, but very often it takes me until I'm halfway through whatever I've written to kind of figure out, oh, this was my main point. This is what I wanted to say. So I almost always have to go back and discard maybe even the first quarter of what I've written because it's taken me that long to get to the point.
Well, you know, my family knows this better than anybody else. If it can be said in a sentence, I'm going to tell you a whole chapter. There is nothing thrifty about the way I communicate, and that is probably my number one hardship. Let's open it up to the room. Any questions before we carry on? I tell us your writing stories, your problems that you have. Let's get it from the expert on how to quickly adjust and move forward. There's no crickets in this room.
It's all on cricket. I'm good at writing math equations. That's why I'm in engineering. Stringing sentences together is a pain in the butt. But we all have to communicate. So I'm open to suggestions on how to stay motivated. I mean, given a choice between writing an email or a proposal or going to meet somebody, guess what? I'm gone. So I'll take any help.
Well, and the handcuffs are on now because, of course, we have to do this digitally. We have to do so much more. What's the answer there for him on how to overcome and get started? Is it confidence?
You know, part of it, well, you asked about motivation. So one of the things I sometimes do is actually write down, maybe on a sticky note, put it right on top of my computer. What am I trying to achieve here? Like, what's my goal? Because in the world of business, none of us are writing, you know, just for our own love of writing, right? It's always about achieving that goal. And so sometimes that might mean that I actually need to write a lot less than I think I do. So for instance, if my goal is to secure a meeting with someone, and it sounds like you're a very people person, so you might actually be trying to get to the meeting as soon as you can, then what do I need to do in that email? I need to grab somebody's attention. I need to intrigue them a little bit, build their trust, and give them a reason for wanting to speak with me. So that doesn't mean that I need to include, everything about what I have to offer or what I ate for breakfast last week or whatever. It could actually be something very tight. So I find that goal focus, that action focus can really help.
I have a hard time with our social media posts. Let's pick on LinkedIn a little bit. You can't bold, you can't underline. If you're capitalizing everything, you're shouting at people. How do we use it? And I'm a storyteller. I'm not grammar. Like that's what I depend on editors for. I can throw it down there as a story, but it needs to be edited big time. And then when I get into these social media posts, and how do I make that message pop with those very limitations?
Well, if you are worried about glitches due to editing, a simple solution to that would be to do it in Word first and then, copy it over. But I think on LinkedIn, what I'm hearing more and more from people is that it's so much about just showing up as yourself and being real. And so to me, I don't know how clever that first little bit has to be. I think people have to get a sense almost of maybe why you wrote it. In a sense, like what's your motivation? I heard an interesting LinkedIn story today, actually. Somebody was talking about a person they knew who had recently changed her LinkedIn profile from a formal headshot to something that was more casual and looked more like her. And apparently she instantly got hundreds and hundreds of likes. So I think even in LinkedIn, which is kind of this stuffier social media platform, I think that's what people want to do is connect with you as a person and your why.
I have a question. I'd like to hear your perspective on writing as, for the sake of writing. So I'm a lawyer, and I do a lot of writing all day, every day, and a real lot of editing every day, and deleting the things that I should not be saying. So I just wonder, I've often thought, I have things to say that don't have necessarily anything to do with work. Is it important to get that out and just have some sort of an outlet to, just journal or do that sort of thing? What are your perspectives on that?
And again, Lori, I'd love to hear your thoughts because you're a very prolific writer. One of my favorite stories is about the person I call my writing guru. He was a professor at University of Massachusetts at Amherst. His name's Peter Elbow. He's written many, many books on writing, leader in the field of teaching writing. And he dropped out of graduate school at one point because he was suffering writer's block. So he just gave it up. He could not write anything, couldn't write a grocery list. And he decided that for a year, all he would do would be journal. Like he couldn't bear the thought of attempting an essay or anything like that. And so over time, just journaling actually brought his skill back and gave him renewed confidence. And actually through that, he then kind of developed this whole expressivist mode of teaching, which focuses a lot on, helping people find their voice and so on. So I am a big, big fan of journaling because if you do it in a very uninhibited way, so not worrying about punctuation, grammar, and all of that, just kind of letting it go, even if you do it 10 minutes a day, it really will help improve your confidence and your fluency. So fluency is how quickly you can get the words out. Doesn't matter what you journal about. And of course, it's also a great place to download those ideas that could turn into something down the road. So I'm absolutely a huge believer in journaling. Do I do it every day? Not always. Am I a better person when I do it every day? Yeah. I'm a better writer when I do it every day.
Well, I think that's a great segue, Dawn, to I've recently had Lois Weinblatt connect with you and Patty was on that particular program when we had Lois in, and she was talking about vision and being able to create your vision. And doesn't that go hand in hand, Patty, with that journaling aspect to understand what your vision is, what you want to pull towards versus your goals, which are pushing you, and being able to journal that out and get a real grasp. I'm the type of person that, Erin, this may be where you start, is just getting a handle on the confusion of this time. The most of my writing is like, if I was setting goals for myself on professional writing or creative writing, that seems to have been fallen into the wastebasket. But if I just look at the fact that we cannot face things head on because they keep coming at us from the side, and to Patty's point on journaling and Dawn's point of just being able to get that out, I think that would be a great starting point. Your thoughts, Dawn?
I am in the midst of reading a great book by, I can't remember his first name, his last name's Chatterjee, and it's called, maybe some of you know it, Feel Better in 5.
Okay.
So his idea is that in order to improve your health, whether it's mental or social or physical, don't try to eat the whole elephant. And in his book, he's got these little health snacks. So things you can do in 5 minutes every day. But as you said, Lori, it's all about consistency, right? So whether it's making a smoothie or it's doing 20 push-ups while your coffee is percolating or whatever. So I kind of think about journaling like that. Like if there's one thing you want to do to write better in 5, I think journaling helps with that.
I don't mean to speak for Robert and Dean and Erin and myself and Tammy, but we're all in the insurance industry and we are considered the tops for boredom. And how to make our messaging interesting while at the same time telling people without expressing that the hearse is one day going to pull up to your door. Like really, if we were going to be blunt, we would say the hearse is going to get there, right? By insurance, but we can't say that. So where's the first step? Like, So now if we establish that we like to write, how do we make it interesting and engaging?
Well, I think part of it is going back to your why. You know, why are you in insurance? Why do you believe in it? And the other thing is to really think about not the content that you need to provide or the information that would be helpful, but really thinking about where you want people to journey with you emotionally. So very often I'll go in to work with a client, let's say on web copy, and I'll say, well, have you done a kind of an audience analysis? Have you looked at different personas for your website, which are, you know, fictional characters that represent your audiences? Oh yeah, we've done that. We did that with the last consultant. And so that's sort of what you have. And they will have thought through their audience often in terms of demographics, how much money they're making, you know, their age, all of these things, right? Which would be so important in your industry. And somebody who's, you know, 35, they just got their first baby, like I would think they'd be like, you know, prime for starting to think about these things, right? But then they often haven't thought about what are these people thinking and feeling, like what's keeping them up at night. And then how can you help? So to me, it's not always about really, you know, pulling that fear throttle. You know, you don't want to go full throttle on the fear. It's really about being able to stand in your audience's shoes and then think, you know, what do you wish for them, right? And how can you help? So I would not think that insurance writing would need to be boring.
Well,
yeah.
See, that's where we need you, because we need more people like you to think that. Melanie brings up a really good point. I'm going to get you to unmute, Melanie, because BBD, or Business Benefits by Design, has done a fantastic job, especially the last 6 months, if I look at your content, in making it real. Can you walk us through that evolution of how you did that?
Definitely. That starts from the top for sure. Mike McClenahan, he's an owner at BBD. He's very much a storyteller. That's how he is in real life and at BBD. I've known him for a long time now in every sort of aspect of my life. And he applies that through the group benefits world as well, where we have some employees in-house who have actually had stories of their own, whether they be through the critical illness benefit or things where the health plan they've had impacted them. So we have a marketing team that I think is trying to really capture how those benefits have impacted our team or people they know of, and wrap them into a story that will help other people relate to how that will help them. So they can relate as a young family and not think that will never happen to me. They can think of how it would happen to someone similar. And when you hear something in a story, it's easier to relate to. At least that's how I feel. So I think that's kind of what we've been doing.
I couldn't agree more, because I think that your posts and the way you're blogging and sending that information out, it absolutely pops and it resonates. Dawn, I want to talk to you about the difference between communication and marketing. And this isn't one that we prepared for when we had a conversation ahead of time, but very often I will run across people or run across marketing agencies who want to take over that content creation. And I've always put a full stop on that, because I don't think that somebody in my industry can understand the industry with the depth and passion that I do. So take us through communication and what you do for clients versus the marketing, because they are, in my opinion, and I think you'll agree, two entirely different segments and mindsets.
I think communicating is about how you get kind of your marketing message out, right? So it's getting it out through the channel. It's about taking that high level strategy and then implementing it, really. One of the ways I am sometimes able to help clients who are struggling with, do I outsource this because I don't have the time, but oh, I don't want to kind of give up my baby and nobody understands this like I do. Sometimes what I'm able to do because of my research background is immerse myself very intensively and very quickly in that world. So I will start reading, you know, everything that an insurance broker, for instance, would read, or somebody running a benefits company. So I'd be looking at trade associations and, you know, trade journals and blogs of influencers in the industry and all this, so that in a very short time, I'm almost like a method actor, right? You know, if somebody's going to play an Amish person in a movie, like they go and they maybe, you know, live in the Amish colony and they wear the clothes and everything. So I kind of do that and able to do that pretty quickly. And so then it almost gets to the point where the client can say, gee, I'd love to write a blog about such and such. I feel this about this critical issue. These are the three things. And I can kind of frame up something, you know, for them to look at and just kind of tweak. So doing some of the kind of the heavy lifting.
And I think, and again, it coincides with that marketing strategy, but it is different. That written word is very, very different.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I love that you've shared a couple of books. That is, so if you haven't checked your chat, make sure you do. She shared out a couple of books that we should consider to get us motivated and get us moving forward. We're coming close to time, so I do want to open it up. What's your feedback? So let's not be shy about this. I'm going to put Murray on the spot because he's always good for that. Murray, you do so much on the policy writing, so much. And I mean, I think Patty is much the same, right? Everything is very legalese and it has to be worded in certain ways. How do you convert your message? What are some of your obstacles?
Well, for me, my obstacles are I'm not a storyteller. I'm not a novel reader either. As a kid, I couldn't get through a Hardy Boys. But I'm a very, very good technical writer. And so that sort of like leaks out into everything I write. It's very to the point. I love lists. I don't love paragraphs. And so for me, I have a lot of trouble writing even LinkedIn posts. I don't do a lot of LinkedIn posts because I'm just not good at it. So that's my biggest struggle is how do I communicate to people who like to read stories?
It sounds to me, Murray, like what would be helpful for you would be some work on ideation, right? So finding the ideas, and there are different ways you can do that through things like clustering. There's a great book by Rico called The Natural Way to Write or Natural Writing. I'd have to look that up. That can be helpful, talking things out. And the other thing is you can become a story hunter. So even if you're not a natural storyteller, there are certain kinds of stories that you can kind of look at as a model and then say, oh, is there something I ran into this week that would kind of fit this model? The stories are essentially, you know, they are structures that get, you know, that's why we have fairy tale is instantly recognizable, right? And so there are certain kinds of stories in business that tend to get repeated. And when you learn to recognize those, it gets much easier to keep your eyes open as you're just going through life and say, oh, that would actually make a good story.
Thank you. That's so helpful.
Yeah, I always think that it's cool when, you know, you almost take them on the journey, like, you know, hey, I'm really bad at storytelling, and over the next 4 weeks, these are the strategies I'm going to use, and watch me, like, you know, so maybe like week 1, you try to tell a story about dragons or something, you know what I mean? It's just like, so people are enjoying watching your journey of getting better at storytelling, right? And they're like, oh yeah, this guy really sucks, I'm gonna watch this, you know? And it's like, you know, it's not a slight at you, it's just like, it's fun to watch. And then the accident is that they end up learning your message, right? It's like, you know, it's like, no, that I don't really think I care about the message until it's like a chocolate covered vegetable, right?
Well, and Tammy makes a good point to what you're talking about, Dean, is on Toastmasters and the value of learning that speech. Now, Patty and I will talk about this because we're in a networking group together. And so when we're presenting every week, we have to shake it up. And I know that she has counseled many of us to say, you know, what's your theme? And to Dean's point, go through that journey and make it different every week. Can you tell us, Patty, you were just recently on a conference and they specifically pointed you out as identifying what those words mean. And can you elaborate a little bit more on how you did that?
Yeah, it was actually quite a compliment. I did an introduction and I explained my boring practice area in words that were, you know, really engaging to, you know, how I can help real people. But this kind of goes into the comment that I was going to make, and that is that I have spent an awful lot of time listening to the words that other people use, the words that my clients use, and the way that they talk about things, and at least starting the story or starting the conversation with the words that they use, because that really engages them. And so, you know, I'm learning how to do that. And, you know, so to explain what I do, I help bankers and entrepreneurs get over the finish line to get money and get on with business and activating our economy. So when you talk it in those words, right, like getting over the finish line, they understand what that is, but I don't have to talk about the mundane things that I really do. So, so listening, I think, is a really important part of writing and telling.
Well, and I think that to your point, Patty, we can turn that to what you were saying about to Dean and to Murray. We can turn that story into our story, right? And I always loved when I first met Patty, the one thing I remembered then, and it resonates every single week because she repeats it every week, is talking to you, not through you. Those are powerful words, Dawn, right? Isn't that why we communicate?
Yes, absolutely. It is all about connecting. It's not about sharing information, it's about connecting.
Well, we're come to time, and I do like to appreciate people have invested these 30 minutes. As we wrap it up, I just want to remind everybody, do make that commitment to have a virtual coffee with somebody. This is how we're growing. We've got all the time zones of Canada represented in the room except Newfoundland. So that's okay because they're only on the half hour, right, Dawn? It's okay to not have Newfoundland.
Yes.
Get them.
Yeah.
We'll get them next time. So do make that commitment to connect with somebody, have that virtual coffee. As I look around this room, I can see so many connections, and I just want you to grow. All boats will float on this good tide. So if you've liked coming in and you've liked the connection and you want to keep it up, join us again next week. We're always going to have a great communicator in for a conversation like Dawn. Thanks so much for coming in, Dawn. I appreciate it.